Hey y'all, I'm James Hudson, and I make board games. I'm a board game publisher, a board game designer, developer, but the main part of my job is I make board games. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I mainly use crowdfunding. So if you're familiar with Kickstarter, or there's a lot of other ones, but Kickstarter probably is the main one that you might have heard of before. Hey Cameron, can you mute yourself? It's reverbing in here. And so I, wanted to talk about the career. I love talking about this sort of thing because my path to get here was weird. I went in and did I say normal jobs, jobs that weren't a part of, the creative side of the world. I worked 11 years in marketing, made good money doing that. Liked the people that I worked with, but for me, the job was never very fulfilling. Like I said, I like the people, like the paycheck, but I never felt like that was my calling, and I never felt really fulfilled from that. And so, about 7, 8 years ago, started playing board games. I got invited. I'm a big nerd. You might see from behind me, I've got I'm a board game nerd, also Marvel nerd, Disney nerd. There's probably a lot of nerddoms that I cross over into. But growing up, I played a ton of Blizzard games. So if you're familiar with Blizzard, they've done World of Warcraft, Overwatch. Those are probably old games for you guys now. You probably don't play those, but that's what I played growing up. And I grew up in Alabama, and you might hear that southern twang in my voice and some of the words that I say. That being a nerd wasn't popular when I was a kid. So I kind of snuffed that and held it back. Hey Tanner, Overwatch. I'm glad you like Overwatch. You tank, DPS, or heal main? I'm a DPS main. And so it was just one of those things that you just didn't consider really choosing a career or trying to go down one of those careers, because you always had parents say, "Oh, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer, or an accountant," and there's nothing wrong with chasing after those things. And then I ended up doing marketing. And so some of my raid friends that I had locally back when I played a lot of Warcraft, they invited me to a board game night. And I was like, guys, I do not want to come play Monopoly with you. That sounds awful. And they're like, we don't play Monopoly. There's a lot better board games than Monopoly. Just come hang out with us. I was like, fine, whatever. And so went and played a board game. It's called Power Grid. And it took about an hour and a half to play, but it was amazing. And it really opened my eyes to I was like, this is a lot of fun. Like I didn't imagine putting my phone down and playing a board game would actually be enjoyable, because all of my experiences growing up were Scrabble, Monopoly, Risk, things that were pretty tedious. And I didn't find a lot of them very fun. But so that really opened my eyes to the modern day board game. And that's kind of what you see behind me, is the hundreds of games that I have that I play with my friends and my family. And so I decided I got an idea for a game. I'd like to try to make one. And so I made a little card game called Barnyard Roundup, and put it on Kickstarter, and it funded. And I learned how to make the game with partners in China, get it shipped to the different fulfillment hubs, and get it to the people who bought it, which was a lot of work. Because the fun side was designing the board game and designing the card game and getting it to work. And I really enjoyed that. What I found less fun was the business side, which was making the game, making the math work, fulfilling things to people who I made promises to. And but all those things go together, right? So met some friends in the industry, made some friends in the industry, and I decided, because the first time I did that Barnyard Roundup, it was more as a hobbyist. It was something I just wanted to do. I wanted to see my name on a box. I wanted to go through the process of making a game, and I thought I had a good idea. And so then I was like, this would be really awesome if I could do this for my living and leave the corporate world and really pursue my passion of being my own boss, making my own games, and doing my own thing. And so I met a designer who had an idea for a game, and I helped him develop it. I found the artist that I thought would make the game really look good and pop. And that game was called The Grim Forest. And so that first game, Barnard Roundup, did like $16,000 or $17,000, and Grim Forest did over $400,000. So at that point, I said, okay, I think I can take the leap and try to do this as a career. Now I've done 11 or 13 or 15, I don't know, a bunch of different Kickstarters. I've collaborated on other Kickstarters with other people. I've helped make games. You may have seen like a game like Trial by Trolley in your local Target. This is a party game where you are trying to, there's two teams. And if you're not familiar with the ethical dilemma, the moral dilemma of the trolley dilemma, there's a trolley out of control. The tracks are going, they have a split, and there's people on the tracks. You have to make a decision. And you typically in these ethics classes, you would argue why you would choose one or the other track, because you can't stop it and it has to go down one. The only thing you can do is switch the tracks. So this was turned into a silly party game that we partnered with Cyanide Happiness, which is a webcomic that makes these stick figures. And anyway, silly fun. I've made party games that are this size all the way up to monstrosities of big tactical miniature based board games. And then I throw it on the ground when I drop it. So you can really, going down the board game path, I really got to chase after my dream of creating worlds. I love creating worlds. I love creating the narrative behind the worlds. And I love making something that we have on the table that is kind of bonding everybody at the table together, because there's some magic in a good board game. It's really hard to explain. It's not like a video game, which I love video games, as I've mentioned. But it's really hard to replicate the bond that a board game has for the people at the table, because there's these moments of we're not even really like talking necessarily to each other, but after we play this game for an hour, we leave the table feeling like we know each other better. And so there's some definite magic there that's hard to explain, but also has turned me into a bit of a board game evangelist, which is why you're hearing me kind of pitch you on board games as I tell you about my career making board games. So I've got a list of questions here. I'll probably dip in and out of them because I'd really like to just leave some time for questions if you have any, because I feel like that's probably more practical for me to answer than for me to give you boring information about my life and career. But a few things that I do think do cover some stuff here that's good. So I've gave you background information. What was the motivation? I kind of touched on that. It was more of a passion for me. I do want to serve a need of giving people things that allow you to kind of put down your electronics and engage with the people around you. I'm not one of those people who are like, we need to get kids off the electronic. I love my electronics. My kids love their electronics. Electronics are part of our life. But I do think there is a portion of our day that we need to probably put the electronics down and engage with humans, right? I think that's a good thing. But I'm not one of those people like, we just need to get rid of electronics. No, we need those. They help all the things. What does a day in the life look like for you and your job? Now that changes day to day, because being a business owner, it feels like you have fires that pop up every day, and every day you spend your time kind of putting out those fires. Today I had several meetings this morning with my logistics team. So as we get ready to finish a board game project, I have to get those games, put them on ocean freighters. So there's the big boats with the big, those big containers, the big 40-foot containers you may have seen an 18-wheeler carrying up and down the road or on train tracks. Those will have all of my games in it. And then those will get put on the boat, and those boats will go to the ports in the different countries so that they can be fulfilled to the backers of the project. So we're working out pricing, and there's some tax issues that I have to work through in the United Kingdom and the EU, because they changed all their laws a few years ago, which makes all of our lives extremely difficult. I was working out an issue with our New Zealand backers because they live at the bottom of the planet. It's very expensive to get them games. So they were very upset at how much it was going to cost just ship them the games. So you just, every day looks a little different in my world. Some days I'm sitting at a table play testing a game and making sure the physical components work the way they're supposed to. Some days there's a software that we use called Tabletop Simulator where people upload. It's on the Steam system. If you have a Steam account, you can check it out, and you can play digitally board games through that. I think it loses a lot of the magic, as I referred to earlier, with the on the table experience, but it's a great tool for playtesting. So we typically build out our games in prototype form within that system, because sometimes I'm working with a designer who lives in Portland, and so it's tough. We don't get to see each other physically, so we test through there. Some days I'm building campaign graphics for the Kickstarter. Some days I am doing taxes. It really changes every day, and I am a solo business owner, so I'm the only employee here for my business. But I do work with a lot of contractors. So a lot of my day too will also be just communication, answering emails, getting them information that they need, getting them assets, things like that. So to be a business owner, you've got to wear a lot of hats, and you've got to be able to kind of jump around into the different lanes and be able to do a lot of different things. And if that scares you, then there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to actually own a business. So like if you're hearing this and you're like, man, I've always wanted to make a board game, you could just kind of focus on being a board game designer, right? So you could come up with board game ideas, prototype those, and then go to board game publishers like me and then pitch them your game idea and get it signed. And then when they make it, you get a percentage of the sales of that game. That is a very viable way to get into the industry. Other ways you can be in this industry, you could be a graphic designer. You can get hired and just be an in-house, what we call in-house graphic designer. So you work specifically for a company just working on their games. Or you could be a freelance, which is who I use, and they work with lots of different companies and take on contract work. You could be in marketing. You could be an influencer. There's a lot of different ways that you can. There's the business side, where you're in the warehousing, or you work for a distributor who they take games from lots of publishers and then help sell them to Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, smaller game stores if you have a board game store in your area. So there's a lot of different avenues. You don't specifically have to do publishing games and being a board game publisher specifically. There's lots of jobs at bigger publishers where they've got lots of employees that handle specific areas within the company. So lots of different ways to get in there. But if you're a solo business owner, and I don't think this is necessarily unique to being a board game publisher, you wear a lot of hats. You have to deal with a lot of different things, and you just got to be okay with being kind of a jack of all trades, jumping around, handling those things. What kind of education training did you need? That's a great question. Specifically for what I'm doing, there's no specific education. I think having general business knowledge is good. A lot of it's trial by error. You've got to just get in and try to make something. That's one of the great things about crowdfunding, is it allows you to, you think you have a great idea, right? So let me give you a little history here, a little bit. In the past, before crowdfunding existed, people might say, I've got this great idea for a product or a game. So they would make it, they would concept it, they would reach out to a manufacturer. Typically those are in China. And you would say, I want to make blah. I think I can sell a ton of these. And then what you get from that manufacturer is like, if you make 1,000, it costs X. If you make 10,000, it costs this much. And so then you're like, cool, I'm going to make 10,000 because that's cheaper per item, and I can make a ton of those, and I'll sell a bunch of them, and I'll be rich. Well, you make those, it costs a bunch of money, you get them shipped over, they're in your garage, and you sell 200. And then you have 9,800 of those puppies sitting in your garage, and you lost a ton of money. So one of the things that's really great about crowdfunding is you think you have a great idea. You think you have something that really, changes the space or does something different. You kind of can get to test that. Um, and you do that before you commit to making it. And it's a really great way, no matter what your idea is, no matter whether it's a board game, an electronic idea, a backpack. I mean, literally anything you come up with, there's a category for it on Kickstarter. You can go check out a way and see what other people are doing in that space to try to innovate and make things. And then also it's risk averse. It allows you to test that idea out and see if there really is a lot of people who think that's a good idea before you invest a ton. I mean, you still have quite a bit of investment on your own, but not nearly as much as in my previous example. And so the other part of that is once you've made something, like in my case, I've made several somethings on crowdfunding. Now you've built an audience that follows you, and they like, I really like the games that this guy makes. I'm going to follow him. And when he makes his next one, I want to see what he's making. And that gets you a lot of return customers and allows you to have, again, more success. Your success builds on top of itself. So as far as education goes, I would say that there's no like going to school to get a degree in board game publishing or design. But there's a lot of trial and error that you can do. And there are actually board game conventions all around the country that are great to go to. You can get kind of exposed to the industries. You can meet people that work in the industry. You can meet designers. They have these things called speed dating, where you actually, if you ever came up with your own board game idea, you can hop in. It's essentially 5 minutes with a publisher. And typically you'll get to meet like 20 publishers, and you'll do this like 20 times. And you'll just pitch your game over and over to publishers. And what the publishers are looking for are games that they want to sign, games that they want to put into their pipeline to put out into the world. The designers kind of get to interview the publishers and tell them about their game. And it gives you great experience on, what publishers are looking for in a game. They're going to give you a ton of great feedback. So if that's something you ever wanted to try, I would suggest checking out a board game convention. Like I said, there's several. There's Gen Con, GENCON. Gen Con. It's in Indianapolis in August. There's a couple of PAX, if you're familiar with PAX. There's a PAX East in Boston. There's a PAX West in Seattle, and then there's a PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. And there's a bunch of more regional ones around the country. So if you just type in Google board game conventions, you might find one close to you. Which tools or resources would you suggest to someone interested in the same career as you? I've kind of touched on some of those things. You guys are probably way smarter, more savvy than me back when I started. But now you've got TikTok, you've got YouTube. In between those two resources, you can almost learn anything. There are a lot of great board game designers on TikTok that are doing a ton of content that you can go watch that will really introduce you to a lot of the themes and mechanics and behind the scenes type approaches to board game design, if that sounds interesting. Same thing on YouTube. Obviously, those are much longer form. Now TikTok has ruined me. I can barely watch YouTube videos. I'm like, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. TikTok is just, that's where I want to spend my time. I want to learn something quick and then move on. What is the average pay range? Well, that is probably a question you can ask an accountant. Much tougher here because your success really dictates the pay range, and there's no way to really predict it. So that one's really, really tough. And I could probably spend a very long time showing you what we call profit and loss statements, where I build out a project and I forecast how many units do I think I'm going to sell? How much is that thing going to cost? How much is it going to cost to ship it to the different places? What am I selling it for at the different breakpoints? How many units I've sold? What does all that kind of go into? What is my profit margin? Out of the profit margin, how much of that money do I actually get to keep? Because I still got to pay taxes and run the business off of that. It gets real boring and technical. So it's tough to say. And also, as far as like, maybe you're thinking, you know, I might want to do this, I need to know how much money I'm going to make so I can survive on it. That's also a tough question when you get into entrepreneurship in general, because being a business owner, anything can happen, good and bad, right? It can go a lot of different directions. So it's really hard to answer the question on pay range. Now, if you go into any of those other jobs that I listed earlier, or you just want to get a job working for a publisher, which I think would be a great way to start, because you'll learn the business and you only have to focus on one or two lanes of responsibility within the umbrella of making a successful company. It really ranges depending on where you live, who you're working for, that sort of thing. I've seen graphic designers that make $50,000 to $60,000 a year. I've seen graphic designers who make $100,000 a year. I've seen designers who only sign games that they're not a publisher. They just sign them. You have a game that does really, really well. You could make several $100,000 just off of a single game, but that's not typical, right? That's not a typical thing in board games. I think board games always also get compared to video games, and the volume of people that we have in the two areas are not even close, right? Like board games are way here, video games, like almost everybody plays some video game or mobile game. So one of the things that we're focusing on in board gaming is just, again, board game evangelism, really trying to open people's eyes to the idea that board games are actually really fun. And, you should own 10 or 20 of like really good ones, because there's like a great example. My son is 13. He is in 8th grade. We're in Southern California, and he had a field trip to, I'm sure maybe you guys have been to a field trip in your area where it's like one of the science camps, you go to, and you spend like 4 days there and you do all kind of sciencey cool stuff. So he was there, and this is all a Pali Science Institute. It's up in the mountains. Well, they had a snowstorm and they got snowed in and they couldn't come home. They couldn't get off the mountain. It was on the national news last week. Actually, it was on like Good Morning America and everything like that. But 500 students because it was 4 different schools that went at the same time. They got locked in there for 4 extra days. So they'd been there 7 or 8 days by the time they finally got to come home. And they played, because they were there so much longer than they were supposed to be, and there was no electronics. You couldn't take your phone. So like they were playing checkers and chess and Connect Four and like just like spades and stuff that you could play with a deck of cards. And I was like, oh, Parker, I didn't think I should have packed you 2 or 3 of your favorite games to take with you. You would have been like the most popular kid there, because they were all bored out of their mind and dying after that second, third day passed when they were supposed to be there. And he's like, yeah, he's like listing off all the games. He's like, I would have loved to play this. I love to play Strike. I'm always going to grab Strike. Strike's this fun dice game. You throw dice in this bowl and you try to be the last person alive. It's great. Takes 5 seconds to teach people. So there's lots of different times that I think board games, card games can really show up and really make an impact on a situation in a hangout space. So let's see, what other questions are there? Average pay range, we talked about that. What are your favorite and least favorite parts of the job? I've again kind of touched on that. My favorite part is making worlds, the project management, the creative side of like matching. So, okay, cool. I've got this design. It has no theme. It's got just the mechanics. I know how the game works. So what does that game need to look like? What does the art on it need to look like? Right. So like when this game came in to us, it was just a trolley dilemma is what they called it. And it was just words on cards. It had no art. It was just, whatever. But I had friends at Sign Unhappiness because I was like, oh man, if we're going to be like running over actual people, we should probably bring that down a couple notches in the realism and be more of like stick figures. And I was like, Rob and his team at Sign Unhappiness, they've got a cool, world of stick figure cartoons that would be perfect for this. And so, like, I'm going to pull out an example here for you. If I can get the box to open. I was like, we need art that makes sense. So, like, you've got, Bigfoot who's finally ready to stop being so shy. Tom Hanks. You don't want to have to run over Tom Hanks. A mother duck and her ducklings. So the fun part of this game is you have these good cards, and actually my bad cards aren't cracked open right now. And then the other team tries to sabotage your track. So you might put like Nickelback on there, because like, who wants to hear Nickelback anymore? You kids probably don't even know who Nickelback is. The world's most annoying sports fan, right? So like you can put all kind of stuff on there. A tiger with a taste for human flesh. So you want to save those people. Anyway, you can do all these things, and you're really just trying to. But so, by the way, I rabbit trail really easily. I really enjoy being able to take a design, match it with the art in the world that's going to make it successful and be a good product. Least favorite part of the job would definitely be the accounting, would definitely be the business side of those profit and loss sheets that I was talking about at the beginning, or the logistics, like being, figuring out these tax laws for all the different countries in the EU, because they all apply the laws differently, stuff like that. I just want to make cool games, but to make cool games, I have to have successful projects so that I have the resources to pay myself and to keep making cool games, and invest in the other parts of the business. So, and try to pay the people that I work with the best that I can. What do you wish you would have known then, getting out of high school, that you know now? All right, so this one's easy for me, but I might make your teachers mad. So you guys might just want to sign off if you're a teacher. It's not that bad. I know you guys are getting nervous right now. So one of the things that school teaches, and I don't think it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just a byproduct of school, right? Work harder and you'll make better grades. Study more, get better grades. And the majority of the time, that's reality, right? Like the harder we study, the more we study, the more effort we put into our study and our homework and our practice, the better grade we get. And that mentality builds an expectation that does not carry over into the real world. There are tons of people in life who work extremely hard and never see the success that they want. There are businesses who work extremely hard and fail. So those two, there's a dichotomy there that school kind of gives you the wrong expectation, because you'll go, well, I worked really, really hard and I failed at this business, and I don't understand why. And one of the things that I was told, unfortunately, wasn't at the very beginning. It's a lesson that I had to learn, and then, as I talk to other entrepreneurs, is that sometimes you can make all the right decisions and still lose when it comes to business, because there's so many factors. A great example is I've got a hit game, and this is not braggadocious. This is just it is objectively true that I have a hit game called Wonderland's War. It came out early last year in 2022. It suffered though because of the pandemic. So we had a campaign that it did like $800,000, and we delivered the game. But when we were delivering it and we were to set things up, we really, it was before COVID. And so we said, hey, it's going to be $20. I don't remember if that's exactly what it was. It's $20 to ship this game. Well, because of the pandemic and the economics tied in and around it, all of the shipping lanes and shipping prices went astronomical. And we'd already collected the money for shipping from people. So the game cost like 4 times that much to ship for every backer. And we had like 10,000 backers. So you can do quick math on your calculator and find out that left a big hole. All right. So we had a really successful game that had a lot of great momentum, is ranked really highly. There's a website called Board Game Geek .com that you can go check out. It's super, super nerdy, but it has a database of all the board games. They're ranked based on other by users. And so like right now, it's Wonderland's War is like about to break into the top 250, like of all time. There's over like 120,000 board games in their database, and Wonderland's War is like 256. Like that's amazing. You're in the top 0.5% of all board games ever made. And so I just say that to say that people, it's not me saying the game's great, it's the players think it's great. But as a product, it was in bad shape because we lost so much money on the shipping. And so it just, again, it's a real life example of you can make a great game, you can price it right, you can have people ready to buy it, give you the money for it, and you still have this big hurdle that you have to overcome. Now we're overcoming it now because we had an expansion that we launched, and it's doing really well. And hopefully there's no more pandemics that mess up the shipping on it. I'm actually in the middle of making it right now. So it's a hard thing to conceptually wrap your head around, that I can make great decisions, I can work really hard, and I can still fail. And then sometimes you see people who don't work hard and they didn't make good decisions and they're incredibly successful. And it's frustrating. So frustrating. It can make you definitely resentful for sure and jaded. But typically, the harder you work, this is a saying that I definitely believe in. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Because working hard just puts you in better positions. It gives you more opportunities so that you don't have failure. It doesn't guarantee you that you're not going to have it, and doesn't guarantee you success, but it gives you more opportunity to be in the right place at the right time with the right product and the right offer. And typically, if you're not working hard and you're not getting those opportunities, you have less chance to be successful. So I wish I would have had a little bit more concept about that going into business. Maybe it's better that I didn't, or I may have not ever went into it. You never know. What was the best advice you have received? So I kind of touched on it just there. It's, I don't know. That's hard to pinpoint best advice I've ever received. But some advice I think I can give to anyone listening that even just wants to go into being an entrepreneur, no matter what it is, whether it's you want to pursue the arts, something in the arts. But if you have an organic passion for something, you have to ride that wave. And so what I mean by that is, I had lots of jobs where I literally dreaded the next day waking up and having to go into that job. That's the opposite of organic passion. So if you have organic passion for something, you don't have to force yourself to get excited to go after, studying more about it or chasing that degree. You really, really want to do it. You ride that wave, take that momentum, and just keep going. Now, I don't know the age ranges of everybody I'm talking to here, but if you ask my son that right now, he'd say, "Oh, I want to be a Twitch streamer." And I'm like, cool. Well, you're gonna need some backups to that. Like, if you've got a ton of organic passion to learn the ins and outs of streaming on Twitch, and building a fan base that follows you and can help support you, do it. But you're also probably running parallel to that. You're going to probably need to have some life skills and some job skills, because you're probably not going to get that instantly. It's going to be something that you need to work alongside while you chase that down. And that may happen. I mean, that's what I did for board games, right? Like, I worked at a job for at least, I guess I was in there. I was still in my old marketing career for 2 years while I made board games and learned how to make board games. So in a lot of cases, the reality of it is you're going to need, I live down here in Irvine, California, and I lived in Hollywood in LA, which is the next county over, for 2-3 years ago. And I mean, everybody there who wants to be an actor or who wants to work in the movie industry, waits tables or is a barista, or they have jobs while they're going to auditions and going to voiceover classes and all those things. So you typically have to do something that's going to run parallel. But if you have that organic passion, really use it, really pursue it, and try to see, can I make a career out of that? Because I tell you, I'm 40, so I don't consider that to be old, but I know you youngins do. But I wish I would have thought more about a career that would make me happy and fulfilled, as opposed to when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I was in college and what degree I wanted. I was like, well, what's going to make me the most money of something I won't hate doing, and just a real bad way of looking at it, I think. And so as far as other advice I can give, I think, because I work with a lot of different people, tons of different people, and the people that I'm always attracted to keep working with, right? You get a vibe. There's definitely vibe checks with people, right? So initially try to have a good vibe, right? Like if you're a positive person with good energy, people are going to be attracted to that. If you're overly negative and, if you don't pass the initial vibe check, people aren't probably going to work with you. But a list of things is like being proactive. Like if I reach out to somebody that I'm interested in working with and they take a week to email me back, that's, unless they had something specific going on, or every time I reach out to them, it takes them 3-4 days to respond. That's not giving, they're leaving me on read. I'm not feeling good about working with them. Right. And people who aren't afraid to say, I don't know. Like there'll be times where I'll ask somebody a question that I think's in their lane, and they'll just, they'll kind of like dance around it. I'm like, you don't really know the answer. So, and then there's other people who say, you know what? I don't know, but I know where I need to find that information. I know who I need to ask, and I'll get that, and I'll be back to you in 2 days. Give me 2 days. You're like, great. Sounds good. Always be learning. There's you're going to be a student the rest of your life if you're any good at what you're doing. You're always going to be learning because everything's always changing. Like right now, I'm spending a lot of time learning AI, learning how that affects the art of AI, how it affects, like the chat side of things. There's just a ton of stuff that could potentially be changing my industry, and so I'm diving into that. I'm not one like, this is going to ruin. No, I mean, I don't know what it's going to do, but if I'm not smart enough to know at least the basics of it, if it does start to change my industry, then I'm way behind. And it could be a tool that it becomes widespread, and it's just the industry standard. And I don't want to be left behind. So you always have to be learning. And if you ever kind of sit back and go, I've got this all figured out, I think you're already in trouble. So yeah, I mean, that would be kind of my advice. Okay. I said I was going to leave lots of time for questions, and I have talked for a solid 40 minutes. So let me see. Is there any questions from anybody watching? I'm happy to answer those. If not, then Cameron, Scott, I guess I'm done.
Hey, Tanner and Ridge, do you guys have any questions for James? Thanks for sharing so much, James. That was awesome. You gave a good overview of how you got to where you are and gave some advice. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. And hopefully my my one caveated thing didn't get the teachers all riled up in here.
We're a very different school, so I don't think that it riled anybody here. We do it totally different than what you would experience.
Well, like I said, I grew up in Alabama, so you can probably throw a dart and guess at what my experience was.
So, kiddos, do you have anything? Are you even alive?
So what would be your just favorite board game you've published or created?
So my favorite game that I play that I didn't publish is called Orleans. It is what we call a bag building game. So you get these little tokens, they go on a bag, and then the board, you're trying to make different things happen. And on your turn, you get to pull out so many tokens, and those tokens, if you combine them in different ways, make certain things happen. And so like you're trying to manage your resources. You get to like buy new tokens to put in the bag. It's super rewarding. It's like one of those like 60-minute type board games. It's pretty thinky. The favorite game I've made, I'm going to look back at my wall real quick. I would say maybe, I think probably Grim Masquerade. So I think I told y'all early on that we made a game called Grim Forest. It's a very, what I would call a family weight game, something you could play with the family. It takes about 30-40 minutes to play. But in that world, we made a game called the Grim Masquerade. And it's more along the lines of social deduction. So if you've heard of Werewolf or Mafia as a game, where you have hidden roles and you're allowed to lie to people, and you're trying to like kill the werewolves before they kill the villagers, type of thing. Grim Masquerade is an approach that's a little more family friendly and a little more. You don't have to directly lie to anybody. So when people say, "Are you the werewolf?" In Werewolf, you're like, "No." You're like, that looks sus. I don't trust you. Where in Grim Masquerade, you're just kind of collecting data, and then you're making guesses based on who you think might be who the other people are. It's one of my favorite games that I've made. But I have a long list of favorite board games. I could spend another hour telling you about all the different genres, all the different board games. There's that list is long.
That's cool. I'd imagine.
That sounds like
I mean,
a
if
fun
that's what you
game.
do, right?
It is. It's also my hobby too, right? Like, so I spend several nights. I say several nights a week. I have one board game night with friends that we go and we play these big elaborate games, and then we have a family board game night where we just play. Because most of the time we're tired by the time the end of the day rolls around, and we play stuff that's just easy card games and fun little things to play. So yeah. Did you have a follow-up question, Tanner?
Yeah. So what was that game called? That was like the werewolf again?
The Grim Masquerade. Oh gosh. So it looks like this. Used to be for sale at Barnes and Noble, but you might be able to find it on Amazon at this point.
Sweet, thank you.
Anything else?
How about you, Rich? You got anything, man?
No questions, but I thought it was really interesting to hear all that.
Cool. Glad I didn't suck.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I was telling Cameron, I was like, one of the things I always try to tell people is I was a C student. I was a C's get degrees kid. I was not a very good student. And I think that's important to talk about just because, I don't know, I think, your society tells you got to make all A's to be successful. And I don't think that's true. I think you can hit your stride at a lot of different points in life. And I didn't hit my stride until my mid-20s. So I hated college. I flunked out of that, didn't finish that. Got like 100 hours. So that was pretty dumb. I wasted a lot of money not getting a degree. I might go back and do that one day just to say I did it. But, if you get passionate about something, there's a lot of ways to learn about that. So C's get degrees. You probably don't want to put that on the poster.
Nobody looks at the transcript unless you're an educator.
Right. Awesome. Well, I've had fun, and if I can ever come back, and if you ever need a follow up, I'm happy to do it. I love to try to inspire folks to get into the arts as a career because it's not the easiest path, but it is a path that's pretty rewarding and very fulfilling if you can make a living doing something that you really enjoy.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time, James. Thanks, Cameron, for getting it all together, and we appreciate you guys. So everybody else, we'll talk to you soon.
There you go.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.